Hello everyone, I hope you had a good lunch and you're not too tired and you're not gonna take a nap now. I'm Laura, I'm gonna moderate this panel. I'm half Bitcoin Explorers. The other one is downstairs, Ricky, moderating the main stage. What we do is we travel the world, reporting the Bitcoin adoption in emerging market and hyperinflated economies. So, of course, on our way, we encountered Hermann in South Africa. Of course, we went to El Salvador. That was actually the beginning of our journey. And we have Gerardo. They are the leader of one of the biggest Bitcoin circular economies out there at the moment. So I want to start with the tricky questions. Which are the main challenges that you encountered so far on building your local circular economies?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I remember at the beginning, it was kind of hard trying to inject Bitcoin into the community. Bitcoin started in El Salvador when the government made it a legal tender. I remember back there, what the government did to introduce Bitcoin to people, they gave the Chivo wallet, the government wallet. Anyone over 18 years old can open the wallet with the ID from the government, and you were given this $30 worth in Bitcoin. That was the strategy of the government back then. What people and at the same time, people put these ATMs, Bitcoin ATMs. So what people did was just to go to the ATM and get the $30 from the ATM. They didn't use Bitcoin much after that.
$30 in El Salvador, where the salary is medium $5–10 per week, is a lot of money.
Well, now there's people doing $7 to $10 a day. So
$30 is like
it's just 3 days of work. There wasn't much Bitcoin around when we started there in Berlin. We started to onboard a business, and it was just a couple of us, and we were trying. Whenever we onboarded a new business, we were buying stuff from that business to try to keep it, alive, like giving that maintenance. But all of a sudden, we have 12, 15, 20 businesses, and we needed to go to all of them. So it was, at the beginning, I remember it was hard trying to attract, because it's this remote mountain, Berlin, not that close, about 3.5 hours from the capital. So I'm trying to attract people with Bitcoin to that community. It was hard at the beginning, I remember, yeah.
But it's beautiful, guys. If you ever go to El Salvador, you have to take some time to go to Berlin. The road is beautiful, and you see the volcanoes. You're gonna love it. South Africa is also a wonderful place, but tell us about your challenges first.
Hello, is it on? Challenges. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Finding ways to inject sats into the local economy is pretty challenging. We were in the fortunate situation of having a platform that we could use. We had a pre-existing donation-based NPO, and so we were already doing fundraising in fiat many, many years before we started the Bitcoin project. So we simply flipped over into doing fundraising in Bitcoin. And so we use that to get sats into the local economy. But it's challenging. Another challenge that we faced was scams. There's a huge prevalence of scams, particularly in communities where you have a very high rate of illiteracy. It's a lot easier to scam someone that can't read. For obvious reasons. You can convince them of almost anything if it sounds good enough. And so that's actually one of the reasons why I started talking about Bitcoin to our coaches. I'd been thinking about it for a while, but I never got around to talking to them about, I had this idea in the back of my head, watching what Bitcoin Beach was doing and so on. I wasn't sure how to approach the topic, and I walked into our headquarters one day, and there was someone sitting there trying to sell the scam to our coaches, and that kind of pushed me into a corner because I realized, well, right then and there, first I asked the person very politely to fuck off. And then
How do you do it in a politely way? Just,
you just say it very softly. Fuck off.
smiling.
Yeah,
Fuck off.
but you know, and then afterwards I realized, well, I kind of have to talk to them about Bitcoin now, because once we leave here, they're going to go out, and this had been a person that had supported the organization prior to this over the course of at least 2 years with food donations and so on. So it was a person that was in a trusted position, and they themselves, this individual, had no idea what they were doing. They themselves did not know that they had been scammed. You know, so I had to talk about I had to talk about Bitcoin with the coaches, because I realized if they walk out of here, they're going to go and look that person up. They knew this person. They trusted this person. I could tell them whatever I wanted. This sounded really good. Free money. I mean, you know. And that's been kind of a general ongoing theme, is that you just encounter scams. And that's on the rise again now, because, you know, when the bull market comes, the scammers crawl out of the woodwork. So that's a big challenge. And it goes hand in hand with one of the other challenges, which is illiteracy. You've got to find really creative ways to educate people on Bitcoin if they can't read and they don't know how many zeros there are in a million. You know, you've got to really find creative ways around that challenge. And it's possible. You can.
Yeah, you definitely can. From these two descriptions, you can tell how different these two communities are already. I think we have visited like 10, 15 local communities around the world, and it's so interesting to see how Bitcoin fits the needs of different cultures and different countries. In Costa Rica, for example, it's full of expats, it's full of Americans, and banking infrastructures in Costa Rica is very basic, so they needed a way to buy a house, to buy a car, and that's why the Bitcoin jungle in Costa Rica is so successful. In Turkey, everyone knows the Turkish lira is hyper-inflated, so Bitcoin is answering that problem. What do you think, guys? I know there are many reasons, but what do you think is the killing feature of Bitcoin in your own country, in your own local communities? In El Salvador, for example, there is the dollars. There is the dollar, so they don't really feel the need. We all know it's going down, but it's not Turkey, it's not Lebanon, it's not South Africa, so they don't feel that need. What do you think it's really needed in El Salvador?
Yeah, so people don't actually get inflation there in El Salvador because they have the US dollar. And you need to actually explain to them what inflation is and why Bitcoin is needed. And even if you explain that to people, if you explain what Bitcoin is, what inflation is, and why Bitcoin is a better money, they just find it easier to keep using the US dollar. We have these analogies like, you know, the smokers, they know it's bad for health, but they keep doing it. Or when you eat fast food, you know that it's not the best food that you can have, but it's easier, and you keep just doing it. And there's a lot of that going on there in El Salvador, because we have the US dollars, but within time it's getting easier because the US dollars keeps, you know, the inflation keeps going up, and people keeps wondering why is it that this thing keeps getting more and more expensive. So people is seeing it, people is starting to get it, and that's what we're trying to do there at the education, trying to explain why Bitcoin is so important. So yeah, but the US dollar is definitely not helping.
Also, El Salvador is it's a country with like the 80% of unbanked people. So maybe the fact of digital payments help a lot.
Yeah, so it's interesting what he was saying, that there's people that cannot read, and there's a lot of that going on in El Salvador. I remember before going to Berlin, Evelyn and I, we went to the whole country, and we visited a lot of communities. And there's a lot of those communities in El Salvador where you have no internet connection, where you have no people with phones, and you pretty much need to fix their whole reality before teach them about Bitcoin. And the reason why we choose Berlin And even in Berlin. Berlin is this place where there's the urban area and then you have the rural area. We are working in the urban area of Berlin because it's easier. If we go to the rural area, again, you need to fix the whole reality first before introduce them to Bitcoin. So that's a challenge, and there's a lot of that going on in El Salvador. Hopefully, things are going to get better, and when the economy gets better in El Salvador, these people will be as well introduced to the banking system, and yes, hopefully that's going to happen sooner than later. Yeah.
Same question.
Yes, of course. One other thing, but I'll do it later.
Yeah, the South African rand helps a bit. It's quite a shitty currency. I mean, I was born in the mid '80s, and at that point it was 1-to-1 to the dollar. Today it's between 18 and 20 to the dollar. So it's not, it's not super inflationary. There are definitely worse places in the world. So it's not really because of the issues of inflation that we see the most interest. I think the one thing that is really, and these are, this is super interesting for me too, because I didn't expect this. Obviously the community that I work in, I come from a far more privileged background. I didn't grow up in a township. I'll never know what it is like to live there. I mean, I've spent more time there than most white South Africans. But a lot of the things that I experienced in this project came as a surprise. And one of those things was that I think a major reason for the adoption of Bitcoin is actually the price of banking. So Anita had a very interesting statistic up on stage when she was on the main stage earlier. The cost of banking in South Africa is higher than what it is in the UK. And obviously, there's no comparison between the level of income between South Africa and the UK. So you can imagine what it's like, relatively speaking, when you want to bank. I mean, you pay if you just look at your bank account. You pay when you put money in, you pay when you take money out, you pay when you swipe your card every single time, you pay monthly fees, you pay every single time you get a fucking SMS from the bank. It's ridiculous. This is the reason why people voluntarily choose not to use their bank accounts, even if they do have bank accounts. So there's only about 30 to 40% of the country that's unbanked, so they don't have a bank account. But the number of people who choose not to use their accounts is far higher than that. So at the end of each month, any town that you drive through, you'll see huge queues at all the cash machines. And these are people who have bank accounts, but then they'll go and queue at the end of the month. They'll withdraw their entire salary into cash, and they'll keep that cash for the rest of the month, and they'll live off of cash until the next month when they get paid their salary into the bank account again. And this is because of banking fees. When we approach people, business owners, coaches, whoever, it's kind of fascinating to see that light bulb moment when they realize, well, first of all, I didn't have to stand in a queue to open this wallet. There was no queue. I just downloaded an app. And the second light bulb moment is when they realize that there's no fees attached to this other than when I make a transaction. So if I put money in here, I can leave it there. Yeah, sure, the price goes up and down in terms of volatility, but there aren't any fees being subtracted from the account for reasons that I don't understand. The banking costs are so convoluted that, again, it comes back to the fine print. In an environment where people are quite illiterate, do you understand what that fine print means, and do you understand why the bank charges? And I mean, I don't even understand it sometimes. So I think that's a big reason for adoption, is the fact that you basically have a free bank account, so to speak.
It's crazy to think that when you do a bank transfer, you pay a fee, but there is literally nothing moving. It's just a number in a database, and the only costs go to the salary of the banking people,
Yeah,
basically.
Just the worst thing is they charge me for sending an email proof of payment. I mean, I can understand an SMS because there's like some network charge, but a fucking email, I mean, come on. Every single email I have to pay to, so the banking costs really.
Jack Mallers calls Bitcoin public payment infrastructures. This is what it is. It does what banking do for a little fraction of the cost in a more secure way, in a transparent way. So I think this is just all you have to know to understand why Bitcoin is the future. Do you guys have a story, a specific story of one person that you really can tell Bitcoin has helped him? I can start. I met Jorge in El Salvador. I'm sure you know him, Cherito Cafe. He's an entrepreneur. He is making coffee. He has beautiful plantation in the north of the country. As many other Salvadorans, Jorge, I don't remember if he didn't have a bank account or if he had a very basic one. Basically, he couldn't sell his coffee alone. He had to go to the coffee cartel, basically big companies like Starbucks that lived very, very small to the agriculture. Like, for example, for €6 of a coffee that Starbucks sells, $6 of a coffee that Starbucks sells in the US, to Jorge arrived like 3 or 5 cents maximum. That is crazy. So Jorge discovered Bitcoin. He started to sell coffee in a website. He created a website in like a week. He started to accept Bitcoin as a payment method. He now sells coffee peer-to-peer to the final consumer. And I mean, to me, this is huge because Jorge doesn't talk to you of Bitcoin like this coin that you buy and you're gonna buy a Lamborghini with it, you're gonna get rich with it. He talks about it as a tool that enhanced his job, that helped him to find more clients and to sell to clients abroad. So I think that this is a very funny and cool story to tell. Do you guys have another one?
Yeah, there in Berlin, there's a lot of different people with their own story on how they've been evolving, on how they use Bitcoin. I remember this lady, Delina. She is from Berlin. She sells food on the Central Park there in Berlin on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. She's not that tech savvy, and she, at the beginning, she didn't want to install a wallet. She didn't want to learn how to use Bitcoin. We finally were able to convince her to use Bitcoin, and then we were saying, just accept Bitcoin. We will exchange that Bitcoin for cash. Let's start that way. And at the beginning, we were doing that. And then she was like, no, I don't. Later on, she was like, I don't need to exchange Bitcoin. I now know how to spend it within Berlin because there's a lot of options, and she was learning. She learned on his own how to spend Bitcoin. Then she was not spending Bitcoin. She was like, I'm not spending my Bitcoin, and now she's going to the center to learn how to do on-chain savings or custodial to save her own Bitcoin. So that's amazing, and we have seen her since the beginning when she didn't want to accept Bitcoin, all the way now that when she's now saving in Bitcoin. So yeah, that's amazing to see.
What's her name?
Delina.
Delina,
yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, there's a couple of stories, but I guess one of my favorite is. So we have this sort of side project in the township where we paint these shacks. We've painted the BTC map 1, and we've painted a couple of others, bit refill, and this is when I mean it came from the idea that one of the things that made Bitcoin Beach really successful at the beginning was actually. With the COVID lockdowns, they distributed grants to people who had their businesses shut down and couldn't operate. And this got a lot of sats into the local community, which could then circulate, and it helped. So we were looking for ways to get additional sats, but small amounts, into the township economy. And this is one of the ideas we came up with. We could paint these shacks, and in exchange for the owner letting us paint their house, we then gave them a set amount of sats per week. They get 6,000 sats a week, which is, I think it's between 2 or 3 euros. It's enough for a bread and a milk or whatever. It contributes to the local economy. It's not enough to sell, but it is enough to spend at the local shops that have been onboarded. And it's great because we paint the logos of companies that have supported us in various ways, or companies that we just use, or projects, or whatever. Anything that we have some sort of a connection with, it causes a lot of excitement on social media. And the one thing that was really cool was about 4 months ago. So in January 2023, we painted a shack. And like all the other shacks, he started receiving this weekly stipend. And about 3 months ago, I heard from one of the coaches that they'd encountered this person, and this dude had been stacking his sats every single week. He hadn't spent a single Satoshi. He was working as this particular guy. I mean, he was living in a shack, so I mean, he's obviously, but he was working. He had a job. He worked as a bricklayer, so he earns I think it's about 20 euros a day or something like that. And it would have been the easiest thing in the world for him to, I mean, one of the shops that we had onboarded was literally a stone's throw away. Would have been the easiest thing in the world for him to just go and spend his sats. And he religiously saved it every week. Then we made a tweet about it, and we posted that on Twitter, and then he doubled his savings within a week because people were like, yeah, throwing more sats at this guy for saving. He got a hardware wallet from Blockstream, a Jade hardware wallet that they gifted to him, I'm not at liberty to say how much he stacked, obviously, but that's going to be really interesting to see the effect that has on the surrounding community, because that is a personal decision that he made. And so if he ends up becoming relatively wealthy compared to the people around him, it's not a handout. He was given those sats. He didn't necessarily work for them, but he could have used it week after week. But week after week, he made the conscious choice not to use it. He made the choice to stack and to save it. And so if he becomes relatively wealthy compared to his neighbors and his family, it's as a result of having made the right decision. And that's super inspiring, and I really can't wait to see the impact that has on him, on the community around him. So it's a story that's still in the process of developing. I don't know where it's going to go, but we'll see.
Two very inspiring stories. I think they do have something in common, even if they're very different, and is that Bitcoin teaches you how to manage your finances in such a better way. I don't know about you guys, but before Bitcoin, I wasn't able to save one single penny at the end of the month. I was spending everything. Yes, I was stupid. Yes, I was in my 20s, so I'm in my 20s, but I was like 21, 22. I really didn't care. I didn't see any purpose in saving. I still couldn't buy anything at the end of the month. So, I mean, this is amazing. And self-custody. What do you guys think of self-custody? I'm sure you know it's very important, but at what point you introduce this with your people? I know it's a very tricky topic. I know Bitcoiners on social media get super upset when you show them a payment made from a custodial app. Maybe they don't understand how difficult it is to introduce people and orange pill people using Phoenix or Breeze that runs their own code on Tor. I mean, guys, there are certain levels. What do you think it's the right one? Where do you start talking about self-custody?
Yeah, so we've been working in Berlin for a year, over 100 businesses being on board. You cannot onboard 100 businesses within a year teaching them how to use Bitcoin only with self-custody. If you go as a maximalist and try to build a community, you're not going to be able to make it. We're trying to be pragmatic there in Berlin. What we do is that we don't care how people start to use Bitcoin as long as they start to use it. And we start to put Bitcoin stickers everywhere, and Bitcoin accepted here, and we painted a big orange wall every time we can there in Berlin, because that's visual. That's going to make people see Bitcoin, 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 and they're going to normalize Bitcoin. We have known a lot of people there in Berlin that have started with a custodial wallet, Lightning wallet, and eventually they have been moving all the way to learn how to save their own self-custody, their own Bitcoin. But it's a whole process of the onboarding. And unless you are there in the field and, real life, you don't get it. And trying to teach people how to use Bitcoin only on self-custody, and you gotta run your own node, you're not gonna board anyone that way. So it's a whole process, and there's different stages of teaching people about Bitcoin. Now we have the opportunity to have a Bitcoin center there in Berlin, where people can go and can ask their questions, and they get interested about self-custody. But there's a whole process before they go to reach to that point. So self-custody, it's important. We're trying to teach as much people as we can there in Berlin about self-custody. But again, we're just being pragmatic there. We don't care how they start, as long as they start using Bitcoin.
What about?
Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation. I don't think we'll ever see the end of it. I consider myself a Bitcoin maximalist. I bought my first Bitcoin peer-to-peer for cash, and the person that got me onto Bitcoin made me download the entire blockchain before he would send it to me to a wallet that was a full node. So that was my entry point to Bitcoin. And but you know, you got to be pragmatic about these things. And I think we use Custodial Lightning for salaries and for the shops. I think that's just the only way that it's going to work. And then we use self-custody for people that choose to save. And then it's all about educating the transition over from Custodial Lightning onto self-custody on-chain. If there's a hardware wallet available, they would use that. I think most of the coaches that are saving, most of the shop owners that are saving are doing so on self-custody hardware wallets. And I think there's a lot of interesting developments. I mean, there's a dude wearing an Aqua t-shirt in front here. This is one of the interesting recent developments that we've had. You know, like the liquid sidechain is not, it's not entirely self-custody, but it is a step in the right direction, I feel, because you do own some sort of a private key, even though it's not Bitcoin on-chain. And yet you don't have that friction of fees. And the Aqua wallet has been great because it gives a person a step in the right direction of having self-custody while still having that Lightning-like experience. It's not a Lightning wallet, but it has that type of experience. You can pay invoices, and it's almost as quick as Blink or Wallet of Satoshi. So I think it's a sort of a directional thing, you know. You got to keep moving in the right direction, but you can't expect to get there yesterday.
Just in case someone is new, I always suggest to keep in a custodial wallet what you need to pay your coffee, your dinner, your hotel, what you need on a daily basis. It's like the wallet that you have in your pocket. You don't want to go around at night with $5,000 in your pocket, but you can go to a pub with $50. So that's what you have to think. And other wallets, of course, are where you put all your savings. So I don't know, everything that is worth for you to put in it. There are some other wallets that allow you to buy Bitcoin inside the other wallet. There are so many different, all are good ones, but yeah, like you have to think like this.
Yeah, I think it's important to let people know when you're introducing them to Bitcoin that what they are installing on their phone is a custodial Lightning wallet, and what that means.
Yeah. It's like an account, like a Facebook account. Is, of course, you don't own your Bitcoin, but you have a very good access to it. If they steal your phone, you can have your sats back. So yeah.
But still, I rather to teach them how to use a custodial Lightning wallet than for them to keep using the traditional banking system. They're in El Salvador, so yeah, there's different stages of onboarding people.
Sorry, can I just add something there? I think it's also important to point out that there are instances where you don't actually want to give a person self-custody. You know, and I
said you don't?
Yeah, there are instances where you want to have a custodial solution. You don't actually want to give people self-custody. I mean, for example, one of the things that we do is we have a rewards program for kids that attend some of our empowerment programs, and if they attend above a certain percentage, we would reward them with sats at the end of the month. It's a type of pocket money. It's the kind of pocket money they would never get from their parents, if they have parents. And so we do that, and we pay that to individual Allen Bits wallets. We run the node, so the organization is effectively the bank. The kids all have a custodial bank account with the organization. They access that using an NFC card, which they can go around and they can spend it at the shops at the end of each month. And so in that case, you don't want to give the kids self-custody because it's kids. I mean, come on. Like, you know, and it's great because we can manage that. If one of them loses a card, it's no big deal. We can just move the sats from one wallet to a new wallet, link a new card to the wallet. It teaches them about spending and saving, but that's a situation where you wouldn't actually want to give somebody self-custody. And so that's also worth considering, that custodial solutions are not this big evil thing that should be avoided at all costs. In some cases, it makes sense.
In some cases, centralization is good, guys. I know some people don't agree, but I think this is one of those cases. Do you guys have any collaboration, sponsorships with companies, organizations, anything that you think it was crucial for the development or of your project and community? You can do sponsorship wherever.
Yeah, so there in Berlin, we haven't been asking for like donations or collaborations actively. It's been from the ground up. Recently, we had a conference. You need to pay for a conference, and there we went and looked for collaborations. And most of the donations and people helping there has been because they go there, they see what's happening, or they see the things that we post, and they've been helping us that way. It's a little bit different the way how we run things. We're getting a lot of help there in Berlin. Everyone is just donating their time and trying to make things happen. Getting all the way there to Berlin, again, is this remote mountain. You need to go to El Salvador, and then you need to go to Berlin. And if you go there and you stay there, it's because you're committed. And usually the people that goes there to Berlin is people that is committed to Bitcoin and really want to help. So that's
proof of work.
Yeah. That helps a lot, but it's always good to receive some help. The reason why we have a Bitcoin center is because of the help that we have received. If we have, I remember we were celebrating, we had money at the beginning. We were like 5 months into the project, and we got a donation to get 10 plastic chairs, and we were like, this is really cool. And now we have these nice things, but it's because of the goodwill of people and the Bitcoiners trying to help and wanting to see Bitcoin to win.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So the organization that we used as a platform to build the circular economy project on top of, there's a pre-existing nonprofit that we've been operating in that township for. Sure. I mean, we started in 2010, and that's always been a donation-based nonprofit organization. So we've been running that operation on donations since forever. And we've looked at ways of trying to, generate income through trading while still maintaining the nonprofit status. And we've always just pivoted back towards a donation-based model, because as soon as you start focusing on trading income, it takes your focus away from the kids, which is ultimately why we started doing it in the first place. So it's a donation-based organization, and that's still the case with the Circular Economy Project. We're just using that as a platform to build the circular economy. So there's been a lot of assistance from companies, organizations. I mean, we received a grant from the Human Rights Foundation last year, which was absolutely fantastic. We received a Bitcoin Discovery grant from Block, which is the umbrella company for all of Jack Dorsey's other companies, Cash App and so on. And those are really the types of grants that make what we do possible. I guess the one other thing I would say on this topic, where I'm as skeptical of charity as a lot of other Bitcoiners in the space, because it kind of feels like you're throwing money into a black hole, and that's kind of how I felt about charity in 2020. I was at a point of giving up the non-profit. I spoke to some other large organization, asked them to take over, and they just said, no, sorry, man, we don't have the funds. And I didn't want to be the one to close the doors. So I also reached a point where I was kind of disillusioned with charity. But I've changed that perspective since switching the nonprofit over to Bitcoin, because a Bitcoin charity is different. If you're running a charity on Bitcoin, you're doing two things at the same time. Yes, you're still doing the thing that you were doing before, whether it's running a soup kitchen, trying to feed the homeless or whatever. You're still doing that, but you're no longer just putting a Band-Aid on an amputation. You're not throwing money into a black hole. Because you're operating on a Bitcoin standard, you're doing more than just that. You're solving two problems at the same time. You're solving the local problem, which might not be a long-term solution. The kids that we work with are going to need to do other things eventually. They can't stay in the program that we run forever. So there are going to have to be, other things. So it's not a solution, but you're helping people through the charity. But more important than that is you're driving Bitcoin adoption with the charity that's running on a Bitcoin standard. And ultimately, that will lead to a world where the type of work that charity does will be less necessary. Because ultimately what you want is you want a Bitcoin standard where people can plan and save for the future and empower themselves. And that's ultimately what's missing, I feel. It's that ability to plan and save for the future. It doesn't matter how poor a person. I mean, I've seen people in the poorest circumstances imaginable. They want to save for the future. It's not that they don't want to. It's that there's no way to do it without access. And traditionally, there has been no access to future savings. So I think, grants, donations, that sort of thing, it makes so much more sense when you're donating to a charity that runs on Bitcoin. And I would encourage people to go out and not only donate to Bitcoin charities, but to try and orange pill charities. Go to them and tell them, look, what you're doing is fantastic and it's great. I'm happy you're feeding these people. But you do realize that this is not a long-term solution. However, if you switch this charity over to a Bitcoin standard, not only are you still doing what you were doing before, you're still feeding the same people, but now you're providing and contributing to a long-term solution, and you're not just putting a Band-Aid on a wound that is far more serious than what you can fix with what you're doing in that moment. You're doing something that solves a long-term issue.
Because of the fiat system, I guess, talking about money is seen as evil. Saying I want to make money, it make you seem like a bad person. Maybe because the fiat money, it's evil. When we went to Kenya, we visited the gridless facility. They are mining Bitcoin, and with the energy that they make, they are able to open power plants that were closed before. So they're now giving back electricity to a lot of families that didn't have electricity before because it wasn't profitable. And when I asked Janet, she's here, what do you like the most about your project? She didn't say like, oh, that we saved a lot of families. She said that we're finally making money, that African families are finally making money, and she was so proud of it, and I was so proud of it. So I think at the end, the goal of Bitcoin is making money in an ethical way, meanwhile having an impact. We shouldn't be ashamed to say that. So yeah, I think that's what we all are here for. What's next, guys? Or maybe, what's next if you had any budget and anything that you could dream of in like the last 5-10 years? Or after that, what's next more real? Like in a few years, what are you building on?
So the plan is keep working in Berlin. Again, there's a lot of people using Bitcoin. We still have a lot of work to do and teach people what Bitcoin really is. We know that. There's still a lot of education to do. If we have a budget, we would like to expand that circular economy to the whole El Salvador. We really like for more people to use more circular economies to appear. We were inspired by Bitcoin Beach, what they did, and we just went and tried to replicate it there in Berlin. But I think it will be healthy for more communities in El Salvador and in the world to do the same. So it will be amazing to try or to have a third place besides Bitcoin Beach, Berlin, and a third or fourth, many different places where you have these Bitcoin circular economies.
Nice. Good luck with that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's two things that's really, really high up on my agenda for what's next. The first thing is a little more immediate. We're in the process of doing fundraising to build a new center in the township. When we first started the project and we started introducing Bitcoin into the township economy, we always had the headquarters down at the beach where we, ran the kids surfing program from. But we realized we had to open a location in the township community itself because it was really hard to get the business owners and the parents and so on down to the beach. I mean, it's only 1.5 kilometers to walk, but still. So we opened an Ekasi center in 2022, and it was always a temporary thing. It's a very, very small little tiny location. It's been over a year now. It'll be 2 years at the end of this year, and so the lessons that we learned from there, we'll take that forward and do something more permanent. And that's basically our primary focus for the rest of this year. But going further forward and looking further ahead than that, my personal mission really is to try and go around South Africa, and not just South Africa, but Southern Africa as well. And go and talk to organizations. There are so many non-profits, there are so many charities that are trying to help people, and I have a lot of respect for work like that. It's often completely thankless. It's often working with no budget, trying to do the work of 5 people because you can't actually pay someone to do what needs to be done. So I get that, I understand it, but what I really want to do is to try and talk to these people and tell them, look, the responsible thing for you to do is to flip this charity onto a Bitcoin standard. Because otherwise all we're doing is we're putting Band-Aids on serious wounds, and it's not going to change anything. You gotta work towards a sustainable solution, and the most concrete sustainable solution that I see is a Bitcoin standard and ultimately one global circular economy.
Nice. I think we're running out of time, but I want you guys to ask some question if you want. In the meantime, while you think about it, you guys can tell where they can find you, maybe on social media, and how to help. I'm sure even a retweet every once in a while is always good, or donation, wherever. Yeah, you can find us on Twitter as Bitcoin Berlin SB, as in El Salvador, at Bitcoin Berlin SB. Lately, we've been pretty active on our social media, so you can see there all the things that we're doing and the projects that we have. How you can help if you ever go to El Salvador, which you should if you haven't, go to Berlin. Go visit there, go see for yourself, go spend some sats within the community. If you have time and you want to get involved, go there and go to the Bitcoin Center. Just ask how I can help, and there's a lot of things to do there, honestly. And we're pretty sure that we can find something where you can help. Thank you.
Yeah, you can find us on Twitter at Bitcoin Ekasi. Otherwise, you can go to the website, bitcoinekasi.com. I've got some stickers here. If you're not going to remember the name, grab a sticker and just go Google the name.
Thank you. Do you guys have any question? Good? None? Okay, one. Here you go. I think I have to give you the microphone.
Thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting. So Bitcoin, of course, goes up in the bull cycle, which is, of course, is very nice because the value goes up. But if you're not in a hyperinflation country, how do people respond that are not so knowledgeable when it goes down? Do they reject it afterwards? Do they still continue? Because that's also part of the deal then, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Obviously, it's a relatively common question, as you can imagine, with the volatility being what it is. So we onboarded our first merchant in August 2021. And if you think back to that part of the cycle, there was quite a bit of a run-up from August 2021 towards November or wherever, where we had the all-time high, and then it dropped significantly. And so throughout all of that, we haven't lost any coaches, thank God. But it's the shop owners, it's the merchants that take the biggest risk, and they obviously, you would encourage them to cash out as often as they need to. But in our case, it's been a bit of a blessing that the shop owners only really receive a small part of their turnover in Bitcoin, because we only have 17 staff spending their sats into the township economy. And so it's just been a constant, almost daily process of talking to the shop owners and sending someone to go and talk to them and checking in with them. We have had one or two instances, and this is just the reality, where we just onboarded a shop owner and the price dropped significantly after that. And it wasn't a lot of money that they would have lost. Maybe a couple of euros, really, not more than that. But then you do have to sometimes go out and make someone whole. So you would then reimburse them to get them back to level where they was, especially if it was someone that you just onboarded a week ago. They took a few payments in Bitcoin and then boom, the price drops by like 30%, which happened quite a few times throughout this bear market. And in those cases, we would then go and make the person whole. And if they still wanted to be on board, that's cool. But if they didn't, at least they didn't walk away with a grudge. And then stable sats, it's very useful. The Galloway team at Blink have done a fantastic job with that. That's quite useful too.
Yeah, and in El Salvador, we have the US dollar, like I was telling you. I remember back in 2021, September 2021, that's when El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as a legal tender. Back then, the price was around, one Bitcoin was 40-something. Then it went all the way to 60, and then went to 17, and Salvadorians saw that happening, and a lot of people were discouraged because of that. And then it comes to education. You need to teach people and zoom out, show them that long-term is needed. That mentality of long-term is needed. And there in Berlin, there's a lot of people using Bitcoin. There's some people saving Bitcoin, but there's some other people using Bitcoin just as they do with, with the US dollar. So there's the economic in El Salvador. There's still a lot of work to do when it comes to the economy. A lot of people, they work today and they make money today to start a new day tomorrow. And they need that money that they make today to start with their business the next day. So there's a lot of people doing that, even with Bitcoin. So it's not much of a difference. If they accept Bitcoin, they need to spend the next day. It's not like it's gonna affect them that much. But again, we're trying to educate people to think long term, to save in Bitcoin, and that comes with education. And you need to teach them to see the whole picture. So they can start learning and thinking long term instead of short term.
Hodl is an elite, is for the elite. A lot of people use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. I've seen so many people also in our travel. They use Bitcoin for accepting Bitcoin, money from abroad, the remittances, they have the family abroad. So they use it for receiving money, and then of course they exchange it into their local currency. And of course, it's part of the game, and the one lucky enough to hodl know that it's volatile in the short term. Are there other questions?
Sorry, can I just add one comment?
Sure.
I think the volatility can also be looked at from a different perspective, because, Bitcoin goes up and down in price, up in the long term. Fiat is only going one direction. And the volatility is also a kind of an opportunity, with education, with patience, with a lot of guidance. We've seen, so there's two individuals in particular. One of our senior coaches, Lutando, he was the first one of our staff to start receiving a portion of his salary in Bitcoin, and he's also the person that onboarded the first shop in August 2021. That shop is still on board, and Lutando still works for the organization today. He's been stacking this entire bear market, and the shop that he onboarded in August 2021 has also been stacking this entire bear market. And so with that volatility comes that opportunity. And it's great that, they made that decision. So that volatility is going to reward them eventually, because the sats that they stacked a year ago were far cheaper than the sats that they're stacking today. but that comes with that requires a lot of guidance and education to help them through that process and ease them through the process and talk about why it might be going down over the short term, but what's the longer future outlook.
Thank you, Hermann. Thank you, Gerardo. Thank you for being here and for listening to us.
Thank you.